Hello guys, it's me, Stark, and I'm here today to talk about something very common in games, which is the Castle Wars. Basically, castle is the strongest building from the Castle Age. Sometimes during games, you might actually have to try to seize some important position, and you are actually want to build a castle to do that. It might be a defensive position, or it might be an offensive one. For example, in this case, you can see freaking Andy building here a castle that will actually cut off this town center from Vivi and also secure all this wood and extra gold placement here on the map. So castles are quite important and they can totally change the outcome of the game. Often this can happen, and one very interesting thing that might happen is that the best reaction to an enemy castle coming forward for yourself is actually your own castle. As you can see in this game, after many fights, neither of the players have a massive army, so they just have a small amount of units. So the Vivi does choose here to actually kill or try to counter the enemy castle with his own. So let's talk about some good practice here. If you want to make a castle, the riskier it is, more villagers I do recommend you to send. Do not try to make a forward castle with only like 5 villagers. Try to send a bit more, and of course having extra villagers will also ensure that your castle is gonna go up. So once you have two castles close from each other, we actually need to consider a few situations. For example, the distance between the castles. On this specific game, the two castles are so close from each other that you can basically attack them. So let's talk about the ways of taking down castles on the Castle Age and on the Imperial Age. If the castles are way too close from each other, I would say that focusing on Imperial Age is not the case, because there are tools that you can use to take down the castle even during the Castle Age. Those tools are the battering run. So if you are within a very close distance and you already have a siege workshop, you can start making battering runs. If you do not have a siege workshop, I do recommend you to add one, like freaking Andy did here. And of course, you can start harassing the enemy castle with runs. Since you are very close from the enemy castle, there's no need to wait and mass like 3-4 runs before attacking. You can keep already sending, and of course, the only counter to runs, there are like 2 counters to runs. The first one being mangonels. If the mangonels can get out of the range of your own castle, they can actually start shooting down your runs. But even so, the runs can still give a significant amount of damage to the castle. And the second way to defend from the runs is to make a few melee units like the Laides, Monaspas, many of the unique units from the castles, or even knights for example, and just drop those to try and kill the castle. Right here, as you can see, Vivi has no melee unit yet to counter the battering run. So while his run is trying to take down the enemy castle, there's a mangonel that can range it. But meanwhile, as you can see, there's a run from freaking Andy that is killing the castle, and it's not managing to do that. Let's also talk about repairing. The thing here about repairing, guys, is pretty simple. If your villagers are on the range of the enemy castle, you do not want to keep repairing, because the enemy castle is just gonna start shooting and killing all of your villagers. By the way, villagers are also a tool to try to take down runs, but since they only have 3 attack, they are obviously gonna be less effective than a melee unit, like a knight, like a Monaspa. Let's take a look here. For example, right there, Viv is coming to try to take the runs, but you actually need a few more units, and my suggestion is that you just drop the units, kill the run, and get inside the castle as soon as possible. So this is basically runs and melee units. So as you can see on this dynamic, both players are doing the very same thing. The second tool that you can use here to take down an enemy castle is using petards. As you can see, Vivi is only creating villagers and Monaspas, but freaking Andy, he was trying here to create the petards. So petards are these gunpowder units from the castle. There you can just make it, and it will just deal a significant amount of damage to the enemy castle or to the enemy buildings. So when you are very close from your opponent, you can actually use petards. If the castles are like very close from each other, you can even send them like one by one, and the castle will have no time to take them down. So this dynamic will end up with one of the players losing its castle, and whoever survives will have a significant advantage. So if you are in the Castle Age and the castles are way too close from each other, those are the best tools for you to use. Battering runs, and petards. And the counters to the battering run is mangonel outside of the range from the enemy castle, or melee units, like you just saw. If you also want to... oh, by the way, we do have here another situation here of castle versus castle. Right here, as you can see, the Georgian player, he is defending once again, and there he comes sending runs. Some players will actually try to use the petards to take down the runs, but to be honest, that's not the most effective way. I would rather have the petards hitting here the enemy castles and just try to use melee units. So thanks to these tips and to these tools, Vivi actually manages to take down 2 castles from his opponent and recover all the map that he had. If he hadn't acted here with his defensive castles, guys, he would most likely have died and or lose it, like this town center and all this position, his other town center and all that position. By winning these castle wars during the castle age, you can get totally ahead of your opponent, because not only your castles will allow you to keep defending this area, but you can also keep making unique units if they are quite good for your civilization. Of course, for some civilizations you might not want to use the unique unit, but for many they are quite a remarkable unit for you to use. So this is the castle age, castle warfare. Let's move towards the imperial age now and discuss a bit. As you can see, guys, in the very same game, a third situation happens here of both players trying to go castle versus castle. As I said, the best counter to a castle is a defensive one. Right there in this example, you could see that freaking Andy did manage to build his castle with all the villagers that he had available, and thus, by building his castle faster, he actually denied his opponent from building a castle. So this is one of the reasons why you actually want to defend castles with castles. Sometimes you can even deny and not get into the castle war situation that we just saw. You can fully deny your opponent castle by making your own here and doing it faster. So the more villagers you have available and the sooner your castle goes up, there's a very good chance that you deny your opponent from fully building it. Another situation that will happen like a lot into games is both players having somewhat castles blocking them from advancing. So right here you do have a castle from the blue player Vivi, and on the other side, but still on the same screen, you have a castle here for the orange player freaking Andy. Different from the castle age warfare, those castles are very far from each other. So trying to take those castles down with battering runs or even petards will actually be slightly more difficult, because there's a lot of time for this guy to react, and basically he can just start hitting all of your siege units or petards with his own before getting hit. In this occasion, the thing here that I would recommend is that you just do some melee units if in case you try to your opponent tries to do that, but honestly he's not a suicidal. So what both players actually do when this happens is to actually rush to Imperial Age. As you can see on this game, both players are rushing towards the Imperial Age, and Vivi is even investing into a secondary castle. So the number of castles and their location here will be very important for this kind of Imperial Age war game. The first thing that you should notice is one of the castles on the hill, because if the castles are on the hill, they will receive significant less damage, especially with some civilizations, for example the Georgians, where all the units and buildings do receive minus 15% damage when located on a higher elevation. So this is something. But for other civs that also matters. By the way, it doesn't matter, guys, the size of the hill. So take a look here on this hill where freaking Andy is building his castle. Yes, that's a hill. It's a very small elevation, but because of this very small elevation, his castle will actually take the benefits from it and will be able to shoot down enemy units. Of course, try to build your castles with as many units as possible. If he did try to build this castle with only like 5 or 6 villagers, he would have probably died. Once you finish to build a castle, you can send them back. So let's now talk about how you can beat your opponent in such scenario. Your biggest weapon and your main tool here are the trebuchets. So what you want to do here is to queue up trebuchets on all of your castles and start shooting the enemy castle. Meanwhile, another good thing that you can actually do here is to actually go for stone. So having some small amount of stone banked up so that you can keep repairing your castle is another way to go. For example, as you can see, Vivi is trying to repair his castle, but he's soon going to run out of stone. In that scenario, if he's not collecting stone, he'll get forced to buy stone in case he needs to take it down. So right there, on these scenarios, what you want to do is to get your trebuchets to shoot the enemy castle, and if possible, you want to focus all trebuchets on the same castle. So right there, I can see a clear mistake on freaking Andy's part here. His trebuchets could actually be all set it up here on the center and focus on a single castle. Since he's not doing that, he's unlikely to kill the enemy castle. Now let's talk about some tools that you can use here, some very cheap ones that can make all the difference. Look at Vivi's castle. It does have access to 5280 HP. The reason is he did research this upgrade called Masonry. So Masonry is a very cheap university upgrade that only costs 150 food, 175 wood, and it does add 10% extra HP, extra melee, and extra pierce armor, also plus 3 building armor. Basically, when you do upgrade Masonry, your castles are going to be a bit more resistant to trebuchets. So in a trap war, if you do have access to this upgrade and your opponent does not, he's actually going to take way more damage. So of course, you expect whenever you are getting into these scenarios that your opponent is also going to research it, because it's such an important tool. The other thing that is worth mentioning here is that some civilizations will have access to bombard cannons, while others will not. If your civilization do have access to bombard cannon, my recommendation is that you try to make at least a few of them, because you can then try to snipe the enemy trebuchets. So now let's talk about sniping the enemy trebs. There are two ways of sniping it: killing it with bombard cannons, killing it with your own trebuchets, or killing with melee units. Ranged units, especially Mangudice, can also do that, but a regular ranged unit like an archer or a cave archer is way too fragile in order to do that. Instead, a small group of raiding cavalry like Hussars can actually nail on this task. So in order to try and avoid that, what you can do is to try to repair your trebuchets. But that's just a limited amount of repairing that you can do before your trebuchet eventually goes out. So if you do have a lot of units here patrolling in the front of your trebuchets, you can actually use these units plus the villagers to actually go there and repair your castle. But as you can see, guys, losing the trap war can be the end of you. So you do want to win this kind of stuff. You do want to take down the enemy castles beforehand, and of course having these upgrades earlier, like the masonry, and having a good amount of stone, even if you have to buy it in order to repair the castle, can actually do a significant difference here on the final result of the game. Right there, as you can see, blue player can just go there and attack and raid his opponent with whatever unit he does want to, but the problem is the orange player will just be able to keep running around the units. There are like no castles to stop the raiders, and he doesn't have the best weapon to take down and advance the trebuchets. I clearly see like no way for this army from the orange player to somehow do any kind of damage to the guy that has the castles. So usually when you get in those situations, whoever wins the trap wars ends up winning the game, or if you are into a similar position. But if you are behind your opponent, that's actually a good opportunity. You can be behind your opponent, win a trap war, and then just get yourself enough time to remake your economy and try like a comeback. Let's discuss that scenario as well. Alright, let's move once again to the situation. Another scenario on this game here. The blue player Vivi was having an edge over his opponent while trading during the Castle Age due to the Byzantine camels. So he did choose to invest even more resources into his army and send forward like 17 villagers to build a castle. This is his opponent base, and as you can see, he's aiming here to get this hill. He's not confident enough to drop a castle on that hill and try even to take down a town center. So this is actually not the best castle in my opinion, because Andy will not lose like a single resource. Even this forward stone, he can still collect a few tiles of it. So this guy will most likely have to relocate no villager at all in order to counter this castle. It's just about moving 2 or 3 vills. So in my opinion, terrible castle. If you do have a castle placed on your front, and if this castle is getting some of your villagers, what you need to do is to relocate your villagers so that you minimize the impact on your economy. Remember that your opponent is also impacting his own economy, sending forward villagers and having like a lot of idle time just in order to make that castle. The best counter that you can do here towards a forward castle is quite simple. You try to click Imperial Age faster, because as you can see the castle was already done, you do not have yours, and then you try to make a castle on a better position to counter. Right there, as you can see, freaking Andy is trying to get a castle down on this hill. The big issue is he doesn't have the map control, so you might have to reclaim at least a small tiny bit of your own map control in order to properly drop a forward castle here or a defensive castle. Meanwhile, his opponent is coming here to drop yet another castle. If he does take this hill, it's gonna be huge, because he will manage to take down this gold as well. So right here, guys, as you can see, we do have another castle war kind of setup. The castles are not hitting each other, so orange player did not try to build his castle there, but instead is building here a bit more defensive, using of course several villagers. He even started with fewer, but as I said, you do want to start with a lot more. Now in this scenario, one of the biggest tools here is to start trapping sooner. So let's see how this will go. By the way, let's also take in mind that those are Byzantine castles with more than 6000 HP during the castle age. And there, as you can see, freaking Andy is already, guys, on the castle age, so on the imperial age. So now that he is on the imperial age, he can start making trebuchets. Of course, what you want to do as well is to take all of your villagers out of the castle zone. So no villagers trying to collect this stone, no villagers trying to collect this gold, no villagers on this forward farming. So the best way to actually defend from these castles there is to go in faster and start trapping down your opponent. His opponent did invest a lot to have army and map control, and did also invest a lot to have a second castle, and now freaking Andy can already start shooting the guy down. By the way, if you do not have a huge army to protect your trebuchets, try to just place it on the safest location as possible under your castle, like he's doing right there. Meanwhile, he is slowly starting to make an army. There will be no direct confrontation, just a castle war. A castle being hit here by an enemy trebuchets will surely fall down, unless you do the other things that we just discussed, and of course that will repair. On this game, Viv is having enough villagers collecting stone. I don't know where they are. So he does have a good amount of stone and he's repairing. But the problem is, by the time he reaches Imperial Age, there are already 2 trebuchets taking him down. So the faster you do advance to Feudal Age, the more you are gonna get a good fight on these situations. Right there, as you can see, freaking Andy is just smashing here the castle without any trouble to do it. And this is huge, guy. This is huge. So right now, 3 trebuchets, about to have 4, it becomes very difficult even for the Byzantine player to do something about it, and his castle goes down. Now let's go for the second castle fight, but let's not forget that freaking Andy do have already 3 trebuchets and a 4th one on the way, while Vivi only has 2. So if you do have more trebuchets than your opponent, and oh, he just lost 1 there, you actually want to aim on the enemy castle. Another big and very important tip, but we should actually make a video specifically about treb wars here, is that you do not want to hit the enemy trebuchets. You actually want to aim on the castle, because the trebuchets have a small accuracy problem. So when trying to hit enemy trebuchets, it's unlikely that all of your trebuchets are gonna hit. So right here, as you can see, Vivi is extensively trying to take down the trebuchets from Andy, but he's missing several shots. He's shooting some, but missing other 2. He like lands 1 shot, missed the other 2. Missed 1, missed 2nd, missed 3rd one. Landed the 3rd one. So every 3 shots you are probably land like a single one. There's some small lucky factor involved on that. So in my personal opinion, you should actively try to aim on the enemy castles instead of the trebuchets. But Andy does think different, and of course there are different ways to defend from that, which and repairing your own trebuchets is also one of them. As you can see, Viv is already about to add some bombard cannons, which, as I said, is a way to take down the enemy trebuchets. With 3 shots, a bombard cannon can take down an enemy treb. So if you have a small group of like 3 trebuchets, well, of 3 bombard cannons, easy to do. But the thing here is, if the castle goes down, he will have nothing to protect these trebuchets, and Andy will be able to use his melee units here. Right here, the castle is about to go down. Despite fighting from downhill, Andy is using several villagers here to repair his trebuchet, and is already using his light cavalry here in order to snipe enemy siege. He did snipe a battering run, the castle is down, now it's time for him to jump on the enemy traps. Enemy bombard cannon is one of the biggest threats there is, so he's actually focusing on these guys. And as you can see, guys, one of the biggest things here was going to Imperial Age faster, getting access to the buildings like masonry, so he already increased some of his HP, and now taking down the enemy threat with a few melee units. If there's no castle to protect the melee units, repairing becomes harder, and army only will have some difficulty, and you can even use everything that you have in order to take down the enemy traps, such as light cavalry, battering runs, it doesn't matter. So basically, that's what you want to do. Do not focus on the trebuchets, yes, instead of that, focus on the castles. And thanks to that maneuver, right now Andy has a great defensive setup. If you do win a castle fight when your opponent tries to castle you up here, you are actually gonna have a way better time defending. For example, as you can see, he does have multiple castles here on his base, so raiding him is way more difficult for Vivi. He would have to flank his enemy, but if he tries to do so, well, Andy is making a big Magno line here and defending his castles while also adding some stone walls. So stone walls combined with some castles, and you have the perfect defense for your Imperial Age against enemy raidings, and then you can actually control the pace of the game. You can actually slow down, build your army, upgrade your army, and go towards the later stages of the game. So castle war is a big thing. We're not even talking about treb wars here, guys. There are way. I honestly want to do a video specifically about trebuchet wars, fast Imperial Age, and how to deal with that, but I think that we just have covered many of the castle versus castle fights setup here and tools to do it. Hope you guys can improve and use these on your own game. So like these guys that are actually executing those maneuvers on a LAN tournament, you can also execute on your own ranked and your own casual games in order to win those fights and get yourself this big leverage. So understanding the castle wars and how to fight them is a key opportunity here to improve your game.